Welcome to the second episode of Freshman Fundamentals, where we're going to be talking about why the heck you need to be keeping a practice journal. If you've been in college music or taken private lessons on your instrument, you've probably been told that you have to keep a practice journal. I know that I was, and I definitely didn't listen. But it really is a good idea. It can help you stay organized, it can help you track your goals, and ultimately, you get better faster. If you're effectively using a practice journal, you can plan ahead for concerts or auditions that you need to be prepared for. So say that you have a wind ensemble concert and your instrument consort has a concert, and you're also preparing for an audition for a local symphony all at the same time. Oh, not to mention the fact that you have your lesson next Monday. This is a situation that you will probably wind up in if you spend a significant amount of time in college music. The practice journal is going to help you manage that amount of responsibility. Beyond all of that, keeping some kind of journal is just good for you. It can help you manage anxiety if that's something that you're prone to, and it can also help reduce stress, which is something that I think all college students need sometimes. If you want more information on how beneficial keeping a journal is, I've linked an article from the University of Rochester Medical Center in the description. As another added bonus, after you fill up your journal, you can always go back and reminisce or look back at everything that you've done. Now that I've completely convinced you to start your own practice journal, the next question you might have is, how? What do I write in it? And the simple but frustrating answer is anything you want. You can do a simple Google search on how to format a practice journal, and you can come up with hundreds of results. But most of them have three things in common. They'll have you write down when and how much you practiced, what you practiced, and what you're planning on doing in the next session. The way that you organize this information is where it gets personal. If you're thinking that you might want to organize your notes by piece, you might be interested in Rob Knopper's binder method. Rob Knopper is a Met Orchestra percussionist and audition hacker. I've linked his website in the description, and you can read a little bit more about how he does his method over there. Basically, Knopper suggests that you put all your excerpts and pieces into separate laminate sheets in a binder, and then take all of your notes on the back of those pieces of music, so all your notes on a certain piece or excerpt are all in one place. This probably makes it a very effective strategy, but it's one that I've personally never used. The fact that it requires physical music and an intense amount of upfront organization has kind of turned me off of it. I actually made the switch to reading all of my music off of a tablet a couple years ago, and I just love the amount of space that I'm saving. But if you're a binder kind of person, I would check it out. Another popular option that's not necessarily music specific is the bullet journal. People keep bullet journals to keep track of everything that they might need to get done, and having used the system briefly myself, I can say that it's effective. I've linked the website in the description as well, so you can do your research on it over there. It's a bit much to cover the whole system here. This, I think, is the best method for someone who wants to take time outside of practicing to make their journal really their own. A bullet journal can be packed with information, and it's extremely flexible, but it can require a lot of maintenance if you're a musician. While I was bullet journaling, I would find sometimes that I'd have to copy down the things that I needed to get done on a new page twice or three times a day. Because if I was writing down 2 or 3 lines of notes on any piece that I was practicing that day, it would just take up a lot of space. And so half of my page would be dedicated to this list of things that I needed to get done. And then the other half would be notes, and then I'd have to wind up copying everything over. And so it was just really a big mess. Eventually, I gave up on the bullet journal just because I didn't want to have to spend all that time formatting my journal, and I'd rather spend more time practicing and just writing things down. If you really like crossing things off a list, and you really want something that's pretty intensely formatted, the bullet journal might be for you. And I will admit that while I was bullet journaling, the look of the pages was really satisfying. After trying a few different ways of keeping a practice journal, I think that I found a way that works pretty well for me. If you've seen my last video, you know that I really meticulously schedule my days, and if you haven't, the link to that's also going to be down in the description. So my practice journal acts as a sort of log for the schedule that I set for myself. I write down everything that I've actually done in my journal, and I get a little bit more specific about each one of those things than I would in my schedule. Quickly, before we get into my method, I have to go over what a Pomodoro is. A Pomodoro is a type of tomato. But the Pomodoro technique, which was developed by Francesco Cirillo, is a method of organizing your time so that you can get the most done. I've also linked the website to this in the description, but essentially, you divide your time into 25-minute intervals, and you pick one very specific goal to get done within those 25-minute intervals. You set a little bit of a timer, and you only work on that goal for 25 minutes. So you can stay very focused for about 25 minutes, and then when your mind starts to wander, you kind of move on to something else. After you do about 4 of these, it's a good idea to take a break. This 25-minute period is called a Pomodoro, and it gets its name from the little kitchen timer that you'll see if you go and visit that website. So it's important that we cover that because I structure my journal around this method. I could go further into why I think that this is such an effective strategy for musicians, but that could be an entire other video. So instead, if you're interested, go down and check out that website, and he will explain to you why you should use his technique way better than I would. So now let's get into my 3-step method for practice journaling. The first step for this method is to set your goals. So this is something I'll do at the beginning of every semester. I'll also do it at the beginning of every month and every week. If you want to see another video on specifically how I set my goals, let me know in the comments and I can put one together. But sit down at the beginning of each week, at least, and write out for yourself what you need to get done and other things that you'd like to work on. Having specific things to work towards is really important to decide what you're going to work on and keep you driven while you're practicing. There's just too many things that you could possibly work on any given day, and deciding these things ahead of time is really essential. So this brings us to step 2, which is to write out your daily log. This is where I write down everything that I did in a day. It differs a bit from my schedule. The schedule is more of an ideal plan for what I expect to be able to do, but the log is where I write out what actually happened. Things are bound to come up that you're not expecting, so I try to account for them in here. This way I can look back at my day in a week or so and more or less immediately recall the events of that day. As you can see, most of this is just a record of what's happening in a day. There's a little space off to the right that I can add some notes if I want to remember something specific about what I did. Now, so far, this probably has gone according to plan, but say I miss the first bus and don't get to school until 8, I would just change the time and note that my fundamental routine was shorter than usual for that day. After my 8:30 theory class, let's say that I have about 2 hours off, so that leaves me time to do about a set of 4 Pomodoros. At this point, I'll expand and get specific about what my goals for each Pomodoro will be. I like to switch practicing for working on homework of some kind. It gets the horn off my face for a bit so I can be more effective the next time I'm in a practice room. So if I were working on a solo piece and a couple of excerpts, let's say, I might lay out my first Pomodoro session like this. Notice that I'll be specific with what my goal is. On the solo piece, I only want to work on learning the first 25 measures. In the excerpt, I'll only be working on intonation, and I'll be doing it with a drone. That way there's no questions. Once I get into a practice room, I know exactly what my plan is. So now, let's say I have a longer break between rehearsal, which ends at 1:20, and my next class at 4. I know that I'm going to do another set of Pomodoros in there. I'm just not sure exactly when I want to do them. I just won't write a time until I know. But I'll still plan the content of each session now. So just the same as the first set, I have very clear goals, and I don't have to think about what I'm doing next. And for now, let's say that I started the Pomodoros at 2:30, but I only finished off the first 3 before I had to leave for class. So this isn't a big deal. I'll just write down the time that I actually wind up completing the Pomodoro next to it. The majority of this schedule will be filled in before the first practice session. And this is going to force you to plan ahead and make decisions on what to practice, because if we try to practice everything at once, we usually wind up practicing nothing or being pretty ineffective with what we do practice. It's definitely some front-end work, but I can usually write one of these out in less than 5 minutes, and it gives me a plan of action for the day. Once the schedule is written, we can get right into our day, and this is where step 3 comes in, taking notes. So as you're completing these Pomodoros or practice sessions, you're going to take notes on what you think went well, what you think needs improvement, and what you think specifically you should work on the next time. This is going to significantly cut down the amount of time that it takes to plan out what you're going to do the next day, because you don't have to piece together your last session from memory. You've written down the next action that you want to take. Because the bottom half of my page is blank, I'll usually take my notes down here. You could go on to another page or keep these notes somewhere separate, but I just like to see everything from one day all on one page. Under solo pieces, we're going to say that for this session, my notes and rhythms were pretty good, except for in one place, and I want to check the intonation next time. For the excerpt that I'm working on, I worked with a drone. I want to make sure that I'm keeping my thirds lowered, and I marked those in the part. And I want to keep focusing on intonation, so I'm going to write that down too. But you get the point. These are notes that I'll be able to go back to and use next time I'm in the practice room. And that's it. This method has worked really well for me to keep me productive and accountable to the goals that I've set for myself, and it really keeps me getting things done. Before I sign off, there is one little thing that I wanted to say about practice journaling. You should pick a format that's going to be satisfying to you, one that you can look at the page at the end of the day and feel really good about it, and something that's going to get you to come back and do it tomorrow. In fact, every little thing that you can do to make journaling satisfying is going to keep you engaged and interested in coming back. I've started so many journals that I got 2 pages into and threw away for the smallest reasons, like, oh, the pages are too small, or even something as little as it won't stay open on the piano. It actually wasn't until I bought this journal that journaling became such an integral part of my practicing. Well, this journal and actually this pen. I just really like the way that it writes, and the pages of this journal are about the same size as my iPad, so I can carry them around together, and I just really enjoy it. But the most important thing to remember when you're keeping your journal is that there is no right way to do it. The right way is the one that's going to be most helpful for you in the practice room. So I encourage you to check out some of the options down in the description, or even try out this method, but really give them a shot for a couple of weeks each and see which one works best for you. Just like in the practice room, you're going to have to experiment with these things until you find what's really going to work. Let me know down in the comments if you think this is going to be a good journaling method for you, or what method you're already using. If you liked the video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and shared it with a friend. It'll do a lot for the channel, especially when we're only on our second video. And if you're not already, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and hit the bell if you want to get notifications. And the next episode of Freshman Fundamentals will be out next Monday.